Good Thursday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, we will be joined by John Fanta. We'll talk some Cavs, that number 3 overall pick. We'll talk Indians as they work through all the injuries to the starting rotation. We'll also talk a little bit of Browns with John Fanta, but we begin by talking Browns with Mac Robinson. And word has come out that Baker Mayfield's agent, Jack Mills, believes that something will get done in terms of contract extension with Baker Mayfield and the Browns this summer. So here is the context in which that was provided. It was from the Land on Demand, an interview with Tony Grossi. And you see this is from BrownsWire.com, who put the transcription of the interview on it. Doesn't think this is going to be dragged out. This is Jack Mills, Baker Mayfield's agent. There's enough contracts done for quarterbacks lately to give them an idea of where that should land. They know what's coming down the road and what's been done. So there isn't any reluctance on the representation for Baker Mayfield's side to get a contract done. Let's bring in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. And Mac, what do you make of it? Certainly sounds like Baker could be the first one of those 3 quarterbacks to get a deal done.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Baker Mayfield, especially when it comes to this contract negotiation, I do think that he should be the first one done, because I understand there's question marks when it comes to Baker, but also given the circumstances that he's had in the past, obviously this is the first year where he's been able to keep a staff with him in his NFL career and bring them over from one season to the next. So, for Baker, I look at what he's got going for him. I think it will be lesser than Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And I think it'll be similar to what we saw last year from the Myles Garrett deal. Myles Garrett's contract came up around this time where he did sign that record-breaking extension until a couple days later when Joey Bosa went ahead and broke that record. So I think Andrew Berry is going to go ahead and see that Baker is going to go ahead and get that contract done, and will end up being a bargain in the long run, I think, because of getting that deal done first and being able to get that contract at a lesser value.
Well, the other thing is it's not Andrew Berry's style from what we've seen to kind of wait and try to figure out, can I get a better deal? He's going to put a value on it, and then he's going to be aggressive in trying to get it done.
Yeah, and especially too, like you said, Andrew Berry has a set price, and, one instance of that is the Jadeveon Clowney saga. Last year he was firm in his price and was firm on, they were interested in him, but they didn't want to go past a certain number, and ended up losing Clowney to the Tennessee Titans last year. Now Clowney this year comes at a lower price, something that was more in their ballpark that they thought, was a good value for them. And so I think that, Andrew Berry and the rest of the Browns front office are going to have a number set in stone pretty much, and maybe have a little bit of wiggle room, but they're not going to go completely overboard, in order to make sure that it gets done. I think that both sides are going to be able to, work this thing out. And I think it's going to get done in quite possibly before training camp.
Yeah, I think that timeline is pretty accurate. So the question becomes, what is that number? CBS Sports is projecting what Baker Mayfield's contract could look like. And they're saying in this range, 4 years, $136 million. So that would come out to about $34 million per year. The projections for both Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are in the $40 to $42, $43 million per year range. Mac, when you're talking that much money, it's easy for me to say, but that's a nice neighborhood to be in. Regardless, generations of Baker Mayfield's family are taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is that when it comes down to it, I know we're splitting hairs and saying, $34 million, it's pretty much a bargain at this point compared to, $42 million. And, it'd be easy for me to say it's not my money. I'm not the one who's spending it. But at the same time, too, looking at it at today's quarterback numbers that we're seeing now, the Jared Goff extension, the Carson Wentz extension, obviously those didn't work out for those teams, and both have now moved on. But at the same time, that's kind of the going rate at this point. A lot of these different quarterbacks, you've seen Deshaun Watson, he's, getting up towards the higher $38 million. And obviously he has his legal issues. But at the same time, a lot of these higher paid quarterbacks, they're in that high $30 million range. And for Baker Mayfield, a quarterback who hasn't been to the Pro Bowl and has had some success, but obviously was hindered by those coaching staff turnovers. I think that's a fair number, and I think it's a fair number for both sides. And when you incorporate the $18 million that he's going to be getting for this year's contract or for next year's contract option, that'll be 5 years and $156 million, which, in the grand scheme of things, a little less than $30 million over 5 years. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take that for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and the flip side of it is if you allow the team, and again, it's got to be a fair deal, but you want to allow the team to extend the pieces around you so that you can be good for a while. That's what a good agent would do for a quarterback, and it certainly sounds like that's going to happen with Baker Mayfield. Well, let's turn our attention. ESPN's Get Up. Marcus Spears asked, would you sign Baker Mayfield to an extension?
No, I wouldn't sign him right now. I'll wait another year, G. His first year under Kevin Stefanski was phenomenal, and they did a phenomenal job, and he looks like the guy that's the perfect fit for this offense. But I got to see it done again. And it's because of Baker and how it started out, and unfortunately for him, going through different coaches in different situations. But when you look at this team, and when you look at the success of the Cleveland Browns, the whole is definitely greater than the one or the few, right? And I understand that you want to get your franchise quarterback locked in, but to Kimberly's point, there's a lot of contracts that's going to have to get done. Andrew Berry has his work. The general manager for the Cleveland Browns has his work cut out for him. It's a good problem because you have so much young talent. But also remember, Myles Garrett just got a $100 million deal. And I get it, that all of this stuff shouldn't affect your starting quarterback. But I just don't believe that Baker right now commands the type of money that you would have to pay for a quarterback in order to alienate other people from your team, and not in a bad way. But this is one of those particular situations where you truly have to ask yourself, is our quarterback lifting the play of everybody around him, or is he a product of the guys that we have around him? And then you make a decision from there. And based on that thought process, for me, I'd wait another year because I have him under cheap money, and I got a lot of other good players, and we could actually make a run at the Super Bowl this year in particular.
And, Mac, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The salary cap's going up, and nobody knows more how valuable Baker Mayfield is to the franchise than the people that are in Berea, and they will act accordingly, I believe.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Overall, I think that the point that he was making, I understand it, and I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, too, again, this is going to be year 2 in that Kevin Stefanski offense. And we already saw where he was at midway through that season when he was finally starting to get comfortable in that offense and comfortable with those receivers around him. And, on top of that, too, his contract, that extension won't hit until 2023. So, you can still bring in guys. And I understand that, you have that option coming up next year where that's going to be $18 million. But again, compared to most quarterbacks, that's actually kind of a bargain. So I think that you can still bring in guys over these next couple of years. And if you're able to get the deal done now before he takes that next step and that big leap that I think he can make this year, I do think that going ahead and looking at what he has done to this point, I think it's enough to where, I'm willing to take my chances with this. It might be a little bit cheaper than what others have been given at that point. And I understand with Baker's track record, but at the same time too, I do think that, Baker Mayfield at this point would be a bargain in the long run, especially given where those numbers are going. And if he does take that leap, then you're going to have to pay him regardless. So I would rather go ahead, maybe take a little bit more of a risk right now and go ahead and pay Baker in order to preserve that bargain that you would have down the road.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. And again, it's going to come down to how the front office views him, and I think we're getting all the signals that they view him as a franchise quarterback that they want to pay, and they want him around for a while. This is an interesting tweet. This one comes from Devin Bush, linebacker from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And take a look. Going to be fun playing 3 Heisman quarterbacks twice a year. And that just speaks to the level of the quarterback play and their young quarterbacks in the AFC North. As you got Burrow, you got Jackson, you got Baker. Those are 3 Heisman winners. And there's some quarterbacks that you got to get through if you're gonna get to that AFC North.
Yeah, and it's funny, looking back at 2017, you look at the quarterbacks that were in this division. You had Andy Dalton, you had Joe Flacco, Deshaun Kaiser, and then Big Ben. Now at this point, completely flipped, complete youth movement. Now you have Baker Mayfield, you have Joe Burrow, 2 number 1 picks, and you got Lamar Jackson, who's already won an MVP in his career. So, you look at the competition level that's gone on throughout the entire division overall. I think that, it is going to be a fun division. And especially, too, you might see a little bit of a changing of the guard. In the AFC North, we've been known as a smash mouth division. And everybody talks about how this is a run first division, and then your defense steps up. Now you're getting those exciting quarterbacks now at this point. You have Baker, you've got Joe Burrow, who is an exciting rookie in and of himself, before he got injured. And then you have Lamar Jackson, obviously, like I mentioned, already won an MVP. So I do think that this is going to be one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL. But I'll say this. I love the quarterback play, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be a meat grinder in the AFC North. You got to go against 2 of those quarterbacks twice, so it'll be interesting. Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, who is playing for a contract on the Browns this year? And there's a national guy that thinks we may see the best Odell Beckham Jr. ever because of the rehab process. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with 92.3 The Fan's Mac Robinson. So Stadium, the channel, had Jordan Palmer on talking about Odell Beckham Jr. And the question was, do the Browns currently have a number 1 wide receiver? Let's listen to Jordan Palmer.
You can make that argument, but he still is what he is. If he catches the ball, he has the ability to make somebody miss. He has the ability to make spectacular catches. The moment's not too big for him. You've never heard, for all the things you've heard about OBJ, we've never heard he doesn't learn the offense, or he doesn't participate in practice, or he busts routes, or you haven't really heard that. And so I think there's going to be something interesting to watch. There was something happened when Adrian Peterson years ago tore his ACL and came back and had a monster year. Some people that were around Adrian Peterson said they thought the reason for that is because when you're rehabbing a knee, you have to put so much time, effort, nutrition, rest, recovery into coming back from that ACL. What I'm curious to see is not can he get back to where he was, but are we going to see the best OBJ we've ever seen? Because the way that he's had to work this offseason and not just get sweaty and tired and push weights around, but really get into the minutia of how your body is with this, which is what you have to do when you come back from an ACL. I either think we're going to see a step slower OBJ, who isn't what he was before because of the injury, or we're going to see the best OBJ we've seen. And I actually am thinking that it's going to be the latter.
Mac Robinson, it's an interesting explanation of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And he really hit the nail on the head with the Adrian Peterson comparison because, especially when it comes to that rehab, especially, we've seen Odell, in that rehab process. It was expected maybe around July where he'll kind of be back and, start to get into the flow of things. But, he's been going full go for the last couple months now. And especially in the voluntary OTAs, this is the first time that we've seen Odell actually practicing with Baker Mayfield in the offseason. And, I do think that Odell's really pushed himself to this point. All of a sudden, a couple days ago, he had the Instagram live or the Instagram video that he put out of him running pretty much full speed on the treadmill. And so for him, being able to push that and really, accelerate that rehab process, I do think that this is going to be the year of OBJ. And I think that, it wouldn't shock me if he led the team in yardage. And I would say this too. I think that, Odell could very well be the breakout star of this offense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. That's a very valid point that Palmer made about the way you rehab an ACL. All right, so ESPN, Keyshawn Johnson, former NFL wide receiver, was asked, who is playing for a contract this year?
Both guys, OBJ and Landry. Yeah. Because if OBJ comes back and becomes OBJ with the blonde hair and kicking of the net, which I love, then they've got to think about extending his contract and taking a look at his numbers because he will be heavily underpaid compared to the other receivers in the league. His teammate, Jarvis Landry, as well. What happens with that? Can we keep two receivers at $25 million
That's a big question, right?
A piece.
Right.
Because if OBJ gets 25, I'll take 23, and then I'll get the other two from OBJ somehow. Mm-hmm. That's the way Landry's going to think about it, and OBJ vice versa. So that's an issue that they've got to figure out how to address, and they can because you play with the salary cap, you play with numbers, you can pay whoever you want to pay.
So what do you make of that, Mac?
I mean, I would say this. It's an interesting point. I mean, he hit the nail on the head where both of them are playing for their futures pretty much at this point. Jarvis Landry, he's been the heart and soul of this team. And, Odell is really that big play threat. And I would say this, if he's able to, perform like Jordan Palmer had said that he could, and, I think that he can, I think that it's something that you're going to have to think about, but at the same time, too, you do have to manage the rest of your cap and the rest of that team. And I understand that the salary cap is rising. I get that. But at the same time, too, down the road, you do have to think about extending some of these other players as well. I know I mentioned that with Baker, but at the same time, too, you can play around with this right now because Baker is so cheap. And at the same time, you're going to have to worry about paying Denzel Ward, paying Nick Chubb, and paying these guys, and even Wyatt Teller, among others. But I do wonder, how is that going to fit into the long term? And that's one of the big storylines that I'm going to be following along this season is how well do they play and how does Andrew Berry kind of balance that side of the offense? You already added Anthony Schwartz and Donovan Peoples-Jones 2 years ago now. I'm curious as to see how they end up playing out and how this offense is kind of integrated between all four of those guys as well.
Yeah, it would appear that two wide receivers, especially when you have to pay Nick Chubb, we've talked about that. That would be a luxury. I don't know that the salary cap will afford them, but we'll see. So Dog Pound Daily came out with the 4 most underhyped players for this year. And on the list is number 4, left tackle Jedrick Wills.
Yeah, this one stood out to me because Jed last year, he played well, especially for a rookie. And on top of that, and the one thing that nobody really brought up, or at least some brought up, but, Jedrick Wills switched from right side to left side. And that's an incredibly difficult, I should say, adjustment, at least for offenses, because you're basically switching your entire technique over from one side of the ball to the other, and you're basically retraining your mind and retraining that muscle memory for yourself. So Jedrick Wills is somebody who I think should be getting more hype because, to be quite honest, he's the biggest question mark at this point. and he really shouldn't be. He's a top 10 draft pick who excelled as a rookie, and I think can take that next step heading into year 2.
So number 3 on the list is a guy that opted out a season ago, defensive tackle Andrew Billings.
Andrew Billings was somebody who I really thought the Browns were missing last year. Now, obviously, you had Larry Ogunjobi, and I love Larry, but Larry's a little bit of a slimmer nose tackle, and he's more of that pass rushing nose tackle. But at the same time, too, Andrew Billings, I mean, look, nobody's going to accuse him of being too skinny. So Andrew Billings is somebody who will eat blocks and will be somebody who is able to stuff the run up the middle and is able to, create openings for guys like Jordan Elliott, for Jadeveon Clowney, for Myles Garrett on the outside as well, and really eat up those blockers and be able to stuff the run. And I think that he's somebody who's going to be very welcome in the interior of that defensive line. And I think he's going to be somebody who's going to make his presence felt early and often.
On the list, number 2, Grant Delpit, safety. Missed all of last year with an injury.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people gave hate to Andrew Sendejo last year, but Sendejo is meant to be that veteran safety and that fourth stringer. Meanwhile, Grant Delpit seemed to be that key piece that the Browns were missing on defense, because he can be that guy who can be over the top for you. He can be that center field safety that you need, but he also can play up to the line of scrimmage and can play in the slot, can play, against the run down low in the box as well. So he can be that versatile safety for you. I think that Joe Woods missed him very dearly last year on that defense. And I think Grant Delpit, he's somebody who, obviously coming off that Achilles, I'm going to be interested to see how well does he play early on and how does he look, at least health-wise. So if he's able to perform well, I think that he's somebody who can have a huge year. And yeah, I think he is a little underhyped coming into this season.
Well, number 1 on the list is Odell Beckham Jr., and I'm not quite sure how much more hype you want. I don't get this one.
Yeah, I think that the underhype part of it, I think that's a bit of a stretch because, the train for Odell has really been rolling here as of late, obviously. I mean, we've been talking about him pretty much this whole entire segment. So I think that he's somebody who is not necessarily underhyped, but I do think that he's somebody who can have a massive impact on the offense. Maybe that's what they were kind of going for. Just the type of impact that Odell can have on this offense is being understated. But even still, I do think that Odell is the key piece in this offense. Him and Nick Chubb, I think those two are going to be the ones that really get this offense going and really are going to make an impact from day one.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear a word of warning from former Browns coach Eric Mangini about pressure and the pressure that might be on the Browns. We'll also take a look at what SpotTrack thinks Nick Chubb's contract might be, the extension, if you will. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it? Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football. So on FS1, The Herd, Eric Mangini, former Browns coach, had this to say about something you have to guard against if you're the Cleveland Browns.
I love the first game of the season, especially after the disaster last year, the first game of the season. And things have changed so dramatically. Last year, no OTAs, no preseason games, first year head coach open up with the Ravens. Now all that's changed, and they get to take their temperature against Kansas City in week 1. But just like we talked about with Tampa, Colin, the expectations can really put a significant amount of pressure on a team. And the last time the Browns had to deal with any type of expectations, it killed them. It hurt Baker. Every loss was like the end of the world, and it ended poorly. So how they're going to deal with now being a successful team and dealing with a quarterback who's emerging, the staff has been together. There's a lot expected from these guys, and if it goes south a little bit early, how are they going to deal with that adversity? That, to me, is the challenge Cleveland faces.
And Mac Robinson, what I would say is we saw that in the first game last year with Kevin Stefanski, and they handled it just fine, which gives you a little bit of confidence that that won't be the case.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that, it kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit, just because, he talks about being an emerging team and emerging quarterback and, dealing with some of these losses. Baker's kind of learned from that already, I feel, because obviously in that only year with Freddie Kitchens, you had that, and basically you had the expectations. But last year, it's not like those expectations necessarily went away. You were expected to be a 8 to 9 win team last year. It's not like the pressure was mounting and everything like that. So I kind of disagree with him to an extent. But I do think that, getting Kansas City in week 1 it's a challenge. Don't get me wrong. But I do think that, it's one that is beneficial for the Browns. I do think that, if they're going to come out of the offseason, again, we talked about it last year where, the Ravens were that week 1 opponent. They were that team that you're going to have to face twice a year. And, I look at Kansas City, and that's the barometer that I want. That's the barometer that I want to see. Where is this team at? Where is this team at from week 1 with a full offseason? Team is able to get together. Let's go ahead and see where they're at, run it up against the AFC champions, and let's go ahead and see how they go. And I do think that, their schedule also following that, you have the Texans, you have the Bears, among others. I think that it behooves them to have some of those opponents who might not necessarily be as challenging, I'll put it nicely, as challenging to start the season following Kansas City. I think it behooves the Browns to have that Kansas City opponent.
The other thing is the Browns have experienced a little bit of success, and Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have made sure the message is hard work is what is needed. So I think it's a little different than the last time. Time will tell. So this is interesting. Everybody knows the Browns need to find a way to extend Nick Chubb. Doesn't have the 5th-year option because he was not a first-round pick. So at the end of this year, his contract is up. Sport Track has tweeted this out. Nick Chubb, likely candidate, and they put the contract in that 4-year, $48 million deal that would mirror Aaron Jones's deal with the Green Bay Packers. Again, that is a Spot Track website that does all of the analytics. What are your thoughts just on that neighborhood and what that would look like as far as a contract for Nick Chubb?
Well, I think the Aaron Jones contract is actually a good ballpark to at least look at. The number looks big, at least $12 million per year, but you also look at the valuation on that deal and the guaranteed money behind that. The cap hit for Aaron Jones this year is only $3 million. And so from there, it kind of goes up in those back years. But at the same time, more of the guaranteed money is in signing bonus, and they're able to get that more towards the front of the contract. So they're able to kind of manipulate the cap number to make things work, but it also gives them an out later on in the deal if they do think that it's time to bail, basically. We've seen that with the Todd Gurley deal in the past. David Johnson, that deal hasn't aged well. Neither has he. But I look at that running back deal, and it gives the Browns an option to kind of get out, but also gives Nick Chubb the valuation that he really deserves. he deserves to be up there. And while he hasn't necessarily shown the receiving ability as much, I think that he can, but I think that they haven't shown that as much. So, the $48 million, it makes sense, and it's honestly respectable for Nick Chubb at that point.
The other thing to keep in mind is the Browns still have about $20 to $21 million under the cap this year. So you use some of that money for the extensions that you need to do. That's the reason that they made the unpopular decision to get rid of Sheldon Richardson. Again, that gives you the money to do some of those extensions. Well, take a look at this. We've talked a little bit about David Njoku, tight end of the Browns. He is enjoying tight end university. Some pictures. It's Eric Ebron, tight end of the Steelers, on the right-hand side, and wearing that Y-3 is David Njoku. And Mac, it's kind of interesting. Njoku, a young guy, talented. It's interesting that he's trying to improve his craft as a tight end.
Yeah, and the one thing that you have to keep an eye out for is that, a lot of these tight ends, you look for that year 5 breakout. It's rare to say for a lot of other positions, but tight end really takes the most amount of time to kind of get used to and get adjusted to it at the next level. So I look at tight ends, and, David Njoku's right in line for that. And in addition to that, too, he was one of the youngest draft picks in that 2017 class. So in addition to being at a position that takes time to learn, he also was younger at that position, just 21 years old on the opener when he first made his debut. So, I look at Njoku. I think he's doing the right things. I think that for him, going to tight end learning from a lot of those veterans and, a lot of the pros that are out there, I think it behooves him. And I think that his athletic ability, I think he can take a big step this year. And, last year, a lot of people brought up Austin Hooper. Obviously, he got paid the most. But at the same time, David Njoku was the best tight end on the roster. So I look at David Njoku. I think he can take that next step. And I think that, Kevin Stefanski is going to utilize him very much so this year and quite frequently this year.
Yeah, and again, you touched on it. He was the youngest guy, a very young draft pick when they made him a late first-round draft pick. They picked up and guaranteed the 5th-year option. So he makes about $6 million. Still pretty affordable. We'll see. Njoku, if he plays well, could be in for a line for a payday as well. As you look at this Browns roster, Mac, are there any areas that you think, boy, they need to try to upgrade that before the season gets rolling?
A lot of it's going to be nitpicking, if I'm being honest. Looking at the roster, I think that if they did bring in one position, I would probably say maybe add a veteran at corner. I think that, adding a little bit of depth, if somebody is willing to take that, I would say go for it. I look at a Garyon Conley or a Steven Nelson or even a Brian Poole at corner. I think that any of those three would make a lot of sense for the team. And I think that it would shore up a lot of that depth options, the depth options that you have from last year. Because, by the end of the season, obviously, people have talked about Robert Jackson, the undrafted free agent, getting a ton of playing time and even getting starts at outside corner. So I think that, for the Browns, it can never hurt you to have too many corners. So I would say maybe add one more corner. But other than that, maybe, an interior defensive lineman, maybe. But I think that even that's nitpicking at this point.
So Browns will get training camp rolling end of July. It's only about 5-6 weeks away. Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We won't be back in 5 or 6 weeks, just a couple minutes. We'll be talking about some guys on the defensive line that are flying under the radar, as well as the biggest question for each and every team. We'll tell you what the Browns is. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Time to head to the voicemail for Truth and Reason. The topic, the Cleveland Browns.
Hey, this is James Styler, long time Browns fan. Hey, I'm wondering, does anybody know anything about two players on their defensive line that really have me intrigued? Marvin Wilson and Curtis Weaver. How they've done in this, how they did in the mini camp. What are your thoughts on those two players?
So, Mac Robinson, I'll let you take that away. I do have a thought, but guests first. Go ahead, Mac.
So, for me, I look at Curtis Weaver. I think that he's somebody who went a little under the radar. You know, he was a late training camp pickup. He was a fifth-round draft pick last year, picked up by Andrew Berry and was stashed on IR. And, you know, from everything that I've heard from the Browns and, you know, in general coming out of Berea, you know, I hear that Weaver looks pretty good. You know, he's come in, you know, he's worked on his body all offseason. Obviously, you know, he was rehabbing. But at the same time, too, I think that Weaver is somebody who's an interesting lottery ticket. You know, I think that he's somebody where if you can get some production out of him, all of a sudden you get that rotation of him, Porter Gustin, you mix in Myles Garrett along with, you know, Clowney and McKinley. I do think that he's somebody who can make an impact, but I think that he's somebody who at this point, you know, we're not necessarily sure what we're going to be able to see on the field. We haven't necessarily seen him as much in practice. So I look at him and I'm interested. I'm interested to see how he plays. Now, Wilson, I would say this, I'm going to temper expectations just because keep in mind he is an undrafted free agent. Now, I understand that he had the injury issues. And his talent was there. You know, he was somebody who was, you know, valued in that second, third round range. But, you know, for him to come onto the Browns, I think that he's going to be somebody who can be a little mixed in. He can, you know, take some time with him, you know, get him some reps, slowly bring him along because you have Jordan Elliott, who was taken in round 3 last year. I think that, you know, Wilson can be interesting depth. And I think that he's somebody who, you know, we have to keep in mind, again, you know, even though they signed him to a massive free agent deal, he also is valued at a 6th-round pick for that guaranteed money that they gave him. So, you know, I think you kind of temper expectations. I think he's going to be quality depth, but I think he can grow into more, you know, in that interior defensive line.
Yeah, and I would say both those guys probably they're looking at guys that they can develop, young guys, because that's what Andrew Berry wants to do. He wants to get young guys that he can develop. And Wilson, after his freshman year at Florida State, was thought to be maybe a first-round pick, you know, early second, late first, and then didn't play as well, was injured some, and when he came back from the injury, didn't play as well. All right, Bleacher Report has said biggest question on every NFL team that they need to answer in 2021 training camp. And for the Browns, it's who else will come through on the defense? They are giving you Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. Who else comes through on the defense?
I mean, pretty much all of the guys that they brought in, I feel like, you know, Andrew Billings is going to be, I know we talked about him in the run defense, but I think he's somebody who can make an impact. I'm looking forward to seeing how Jordan Elliott takes that sophomore jump because I do know that they value him very highly. They took him in the 3rd round last year, but I know that they're expecting a lot out of him. But I do look at overall, you know, I think that they've done well. I look at the defensive backs that they've been able to bring in. I look at Greg Newsome, obviously, first-round draft pick. Greedy Williams rehabbing, if he's able to give them something as well, that's huge. And, the other additions between Troy Hill, John Johnson, JOK, I feel like they've done a very good job, for adding to the rest of that defense. They've really remade an entire defense in an offseason, which I thought might have been a 2 or 3 year process. I didn't expect them to do it in one. So, for them to be able to do that, I think that they're going to be able to, play well together. And I do think that they'll very much so play very well together.
Yeah, what I would say is if Anthony Walker and John Johnson play like they're capable of, Browns are a playoff team and a team positioned to make a deep run. If they get Jadeveon Clowney to be what he potentially can be, then you're talking deeper and deeper, and you're seriously challenging to be a Super Bowl type team.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with Jadeveon Clowney. Because, we've talked about it where he's known as a run stopper. And if he gives you that pass rushing potential that you've heard about since he came out of South Carolina in 2014, all of a sudden that's just gravy. Because now at that point, you've got two athletic freaks coming off the edge. You've got linebackers who are athletic enough to be able to play off each other. I think that this defense can really come through. And I do think that, it unlocks a lot of potential. And I think that this Browns defense has the capability to be a top 10 defense in the NFL. And combine that with where the offense was last year and where they can go, at least from here, I'm very excited about this team. I think that, like you said, they can go deeper and deeper with just how good that defense is.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mac.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always appreciate the time.
All right, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. John Fanta will join us on the other side of the break. And we'll talk about the Browns' offensive line ranking. This one is going to surprise you. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens? Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Sports for CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to continue talking Browns football. Let's welcome in John Fanta. John, first thing we are going to touch on, ranking of the offensive lines by the Pro Football Network. We have the Saints as the top-ranked one. Cowboys are ranked number 2. Washington football team number 3. Ravens number 5. They have the Browns offensive line ranked number 6 in the NFL. Just your reaction to that.
Yeah, I'll prefer the Pro Football Focus ranking system, Dave Bacon. And just unbiased opinion heading into this, to see the Washington football team ahead of the Cleveland Browns is a glaring sight, especially when you consider the fact that Washington's offensive line, albeit good, their quarterbacks faced a lot of pressure last season by the same token. Baker Mayfield did not. and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt could run wherever they wanted to. The Cleveland Browns have the best offensive line in the AFC North as well. And I think that that's been shown. It is the Browns' strength. It is their differentiator in games. To see the Ravens ahead of them, I don't know what logic that is based on. And I also think that when you look at what the Browns have, not only what they had last year, Dave, but what they have coming back, they've even added some depth here in the offseason as well. This Cleveland Browns offensive line is potentially the standard of the league. To see a team that made it and got a win in the playoffs now be back to 6, I'm just shocked to not see them in the top 5. I think top 5 at worst for this team's offensive line. It is the top strength of a team that, by the way, has a very, very strong wide receiver core and an outstanding running back duo. I would still put the offensive line as the Browns' biggest strength. And for a team that can contend for an AFC championship, how could this be any worse than top 5?
Well, the other thing is all 5 guys are back, and you've got a rookie left tackle who switched from right tackle to left tackle, so you figure Jedrick Wills is going to take a huge step forward in his second year as a left tackle. At least that's kind of the way that I'm thinking of it as well.
There's a learning curve there. With Jedrick Wills, there was a learning curve, and his metrics were still pretty good for a rookie. You'd have to think that his pass blocking is only going to get better here, and having to make that transition was not easy. But the Browns showed how much trust they have in Jedrick Wills by putting him right there at left tackle and not really ever questioning that idea. And Jedrick Wills more than checked out. Wyatt Teller was quite arguably the best offensive lineman in football last year. We've talked about on this very show J.C. Tretter and what his presence means. Joel Bitonio is right there as well as a steady Eddie type of guy. So you keep that core intact. And you're talking about, from a Pro Football Focus standpoint, the top offensive line in football last year. You bring everybody back, and they're not in the top 5 of another ranking system. I'm sorry, but that doesn't check out to me when they bring everyone back into the equation, and I would only expect Jedrick Wills to take that leap. And by the way, beyond those 5, in the event there's an injury, the Browns do have some options that can stand in as steady enough reinforcements.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's switch our focus just a little bit. A guy who is maybe a little bit under the radar that you think could potentially have a breakout season for the Browns in 2021.
He's part of that loaded receiver core. It's DPJ. It's Donovan Peoples-Jones, Dave, who I expect to take another leap. And I say another because I think within his rookie season, we saw Donovan Peoples-Jones take leaps throughout that journey, but catches the football, makes big plays happen. That touchdown reception in Cincinnati, you cannot overstate what that had to mean for the rookie's confidence. Baker Mayfield is comfortable making connections with Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I think that he is the guy that is going to end up getting the football when OBJ and Jarvis Landry are getting a lot of pressure on them. Peoples-Jones has earned a trust factor in a rather quick period of time. And I think, like you said with Jedrick Wills, growing from year 1 to year 2, I would expect in a normal offseason, in a normal lead up to the season, that Kevin Stefanski and that offensive coaching room, that wide receivers room, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I remember Kevin Stefanski described him like a sponge last year. I would imagine that DPJ takes his game to the next level and he has a breakout season. The reason why I went with him is because I do think that he could fly under the radar a little bit in the loaded receiver core. And I know that some have talked about maybe a Greedy Williams, maybe a Browns defensive player. It's a little bit tougher with so many new starters and past injuries with some of those players for me to vote on them. That's why I'm going to go with Donovan Peoples-Jones.
John Fanta and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll shift our attention to the Indians and the Cavs. Tristan McKenzie, a pretty decent start down at AAA last night. We'll take a look. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org, because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Sports for CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. Indians getting set to start a 4-game series in Minnesota, and now none. That's right, none of the Indians' starting rotation is available for the next couple of weeks. Aaron Savali on the shelf for 4 to 5 weeks. He won't be able to help the Indians in the rotation. Yesterday down in Columbus, though, a guy who might be getting the call back up, Tristan McKenzie, pitching for the Clippers, and nicely enough, it was Roberto Perez who was on a rehab assignment catching him, and McKenzie actually looked pretty good. Number of strikeouts for the Columbus Clippers, and trying to get back and help the Indians. He could be a guy they look at Monday to slot in and start in that series opener after the Twins series. John, they need Tristan McKenzie to get things straightened out and come up and help the big league team. He looked pretty good last night.
Well, he did look good. He's still dealing with some command issues, and the 4 walks are a concern to me still in that rehab assignment. The fact is, Tristan McKenzie is down in Columbus because of his command and because he doesn't have a second or third go-to strike. So that fastball, it's a quality fastball. But as an outing goes on, you have got to be able to throw that slider. You've got to be able to throw that changeup for a strike and in the right location. Now, it is ironic that Roberto Perez is in said rehab assignment, and you cannot fully account for what Roberto Perez means from a defensive standpoint and from a game management standpoint. You're already dealing with a ton of issues as a pitching staff if you're Terry Francona and Carl Willis. You need Roberto Perez to be behind the plate to try to manage through that, because he knows these guys better than anybody does back there. So for Tristan McKenzie, do I think that he's as good as any option that the Indians have right now in their rotation? Yes. But when you walk everybody in sight, and that's what led to your second departure down to Columbus, they have to make sure that when they bring him back up, if he's getting hit hard, he's getting hit hard. But you cannot be walking people. And I talked with Tristan McKenzie last year a little bit about this and asked him about the atmosphere when you are inside a rotation that features Shane Bieber, Zach Plesac, at the time Mike Clevenger, and Aaron Savali, and if that was a challenge, because you know what the standard is. Well, right now, they just need Tristan McKenzie to be himself. And they need him back up here. There's no qualms about it. They need him back with the big club because the Indians are starving for anybody to keep their boat steady. It can stay above the water here for the next couple of weeks because the competition level of these next couple of series still isn't particularly great. You got the Twins and the Tigers coming up, but I got to tell you, July starts with a bang. It starts with the Houston Astros, and it continues. It is quite the gauntlet of a July schedule, and I am concerned about this rotation going forward against that schedule, and that's why Tristan McKenzie's role is so big.
Yeah, and you, we've kind of alluded to it. So Roberto Perez is on a rehab assignment, trying to make his way back. A couple of at-bats last night in Columbus. Pretty uneventful at-bats as things go. Did draw a bases-loaded walk, got an RBI right there. But the main thing is, as soon as his finger can handle it, remember he had a broken finger, as soon as his finger can handle it, his rehab's done. They just want to make sure the finger is ready to go, and he will be up here because they need him to handle this young pitching.
Young would be the way to describe it. That's a good way to put it. And I think that for Roberto Perez, he's as good of a defensive catcher as you're going to find in Major League Baseball. That's one thing that when we attach the Indians' success to certain qualities, that's a quality that I think could be at the front of the table a little bit more. So the moment that Roberto Perez, if they believe he can handle things, he's going to be back up with the Indians. The fact is that Austin Hedges hasn't been the answer to the problems, and that the Indians don't have much of a catching ensemble of guys that can handle what Roberto Perez can handle behind the plate. Look, they're not getting a lot of offense from the catcher position to begin with. Roberto Perez, his bat is not what he's known for, but he is a game manager, and he is a backstop that the Indians can count on day in and day out. And that's why they need him back up with the club, and frankly, they need Franmil Reyes. The fact is, for the Indians to be at their best, and look, they're 2.5 games out as we talk right now, the Cleveland Indians were planning on Franmil Reyes and Jose Ramirez to be at the forefront of their offense, and they've been trying to piece it together without Reyes, and some guys have turned it on. But they need Perez and Reyes back ASAP, because if they're going to handle what they have coming up, Oakland a couple of times, Houston a couple of times, Tampa Bay a couple of times, all in July, they're going to need those guys.
Yeah,
they're going to need them ASAP.
Without question. And just to, before we move on, we're going to move on to the Cavs. So this is what the rotation looks like. It's J.C. Mejia, Cal Quantrill, Sam Hentges, Eli Morgan, and then to be determined, which would be Monday, it's probably going to be Tristan McKenzie. That would coincide with pitching on the 5th day when he pitched yesterday. All right, let's move on. So the Cavs get a little bit of fortune in the lottery. They get the ping pong balls to line up, not perfectly, but enough so that they get the 3rd pick in the draft. John, who are you looking at as somebody that would fit, that could help the Cavs find some offense? Were he available at number 3?
If Jalen Suggs is on the board at number 3, the Gonzaga superstar is the pick in my brain. Jalen Suggs is an elite-level playmaker and showed us as a freshman at Gonzaga all the way up until the national championship game just what he is capable of. To get that type of a talent at the age of 20 and bring him in, he's not just a scorer. He has proven that he can deliver plays to others. And I think, Dave, that there were times when Jalen Suggs made plays in college that were even too advanced for some of his teammates. That won't be the case in the NBA. Why Jalen Suggs over Jalen Green of G League Ignite? I know you've talked on your show this week about Ignite. Jalen Green showed us that he could be an electrifying scorer. There's plenty of scoring around in the NBA. You know, there's enough scoring. You have to be able to create plays for others. And I would pick Suggs over Green in the playmaking category, in the intangible category as well, and in the athleticism category. I also think that there's a lot of people who say, wait, the Cavs have a clear need in their front court, so why wouldn't you go get Evan Mobley? Just because you have a clear need doesn't make the clear need a priority over an elite playmaking guard in a guards league where you have to be able to find others, make others better around you. So that's why, in my opinion, Jalen Suggs should be the pick for the Cavaliers at number 3 if he's on the board. And the Cavs should absolutely keep that pick at number 3. I do not think they should be trading. There's too much great talent at the top of this draft board.
John Fanta, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. John, thanks very much for joining us. As always, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, John Fanta. That'll do it for this edition of Sports 4 CLE. We will see you again tomorrow. Scheduled guests, the D-Man, Dennis Maniloff, and Tim Bielik. We'll talk plenty of Browns, a little bit of NBA draft capital as well, who the Cavs might be looking at. We'll see you again tomorrow on Sports 4 CLE. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4.